This is the Q&A podcast. I'm Aiden, that's Quinn, and we have a little history lesson for you today.
Wow.
Philosophy. Philosophy is a way of thinking, a way of life even. There have been many philosophers over the course of history, and many are recognizable by name, such as Plato. Today, however, we will be giving a history and somewhat of a biography of a lesser-known philosopher, one who was equal, if not more committed to his beliefs than any other philosopher, except maybe the man who jumped into a volcano to prove a point. His name? Diogenes. Diogenes was an ancient Greek philosopher who was alive around the time of 300 BC. There is little, if nothing, known about his childhood due to the fact that he was alive so long ago. What we do know is both admirable and hilarious. Before he became a philosopher, he was just a man who worked at a bank with his father in Greece. The historical lines of accuracy regarding Diogenes from this point on are a little bit blurry, so take everything with a grain of salt. It was said that an oracle had told Diogenes that he needed to deface the currency, which he took literally. What the oracle really meant was to deface the political currency rather than the actual money. Once he realizes this, he set out on his journey. Diogenes and his father were exiled for the stunt and went on their own separate ways from that point on. Diogenes took a slave with him on his journey to Athens, but he eventually escaped once they made it there. Now Diogenes believed that he could deface the political currency by proving to others that one could achieve happiness without personal possessions and modern luxuries. Now I'm going to hand the mic over to Quinn, and he's going to take over for the rest of the podcast.
Thank you, Aiden. Now we're going to talk about Diogenes and his time spent in Athens. The first thing Diogenes needed to do was get a place to live. Now, most people around the time would find an inn to live in, or maybe even get a house. Diogenes didn't like the idea of owning something as simple as a house, so he instead decided to get what it was essentially a big barrel, which was more akin to half of a bathtub, to spend the rest of his life in. Living in a barrel already sounds extreme enough, but this is only the tip of the iceberg, people. It only goes down from here. Diogenes would become notorious in Athens for performing all sorts of crazy stunts, for he had no regard for the customs or laws at the time. For example, he would often eat food at the marketplace, something that was not done at the time. Think of it as like wearing a hat inside of a church. He was also homeless and owned no traditional clothing. His only possessions at the time was a bowl and his barrel, but threw the bowl away after seeing someone cup their hands and drink water out of a puddle. This almost sounds like modern protesting, trying to break the norm. However, he would also take part in public peeing and defecating wherever he pleased. The most memorable, though, he would do it in other philosopher lecture halls as well as on people who disrespected him. Oh, and he would also publicly masturbate. Diogenes did not like other philosophers, if you couldn't tell from the peeing and pooping inside their lecture halls. However, one time he took things even further than this. Among the philosophers, a challenge was afoot. The challenge was to describe a human being using the least amount of words as possible. Plato, another great at the time, described the human as featherless biped. Diogenes did not like this description. In fact, he didn't even like Plato. So during one of Plato's lectures, he barged in with a dead chicken, with all the feathers plucked from it. He then proclaimed, "Behold, I have brought you a man," then left. He eventually made Plato change his description of a human being into featherless biped with flat nails.
That's going to be all for the Q&A podcast. Rate 5 stars for part 2. In part 2, we'll talk about his time as a slave and theories of his death.
Wow.